Boldwood presents The Bad Penny, written by Lindsey Hutchinson and read by Annie Aldington. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. Birmingham, 1894. The scream echoed along Erskine Street, rising above the cacophony of pedestrians' tramping feet and the rattle of cartwheels. The piercing sound jolted 20-year-old Jared Johnson from the reverie of enjoying his lunch of bread, cheese and ham. Twisting towards the direction of the noise from his seat on the cart, his eyes scanned the people in search of the woman whose howl came again. A girl he guessed to be about his own age was sobbing as she tried to fend off the blows being rained down on her by an older man. The contretemps was taking place on a patch of stubby grass at the front of the old house. Jared threw down his food, leapt from the cart, and raced towards the melee, his hobnailed boots loud on the cobblestones. Skidding to a halt with a screech, he vaulted the rickety old garden gate to land squarely on both feet. "Stop that!" he yelled, pulling the girl away from her assailant before standing in front of her like a shield. "What the—" the man gasped. Jared stood 6 feet tall with broad shoulders, the rippling muscles in his arms visible beneath his rolled-up shirt sleeves. A shock of shining dark hair hung loose to reach his collar, and eyes so dark they appeared to be black-glared. "Bugger off, and mind your own business," growled the man, who was in trousers and a vest, braces hanging loose. "Not when I see a lady in distress. You should be ashamed of yourself for striking a poor defenceless girl," Jared returned. "I'll have you know that's my daughter. I don't care if she's the Queen of England. I cannot condone hitting a woman." Jared subconsciously turned his body slightly to the right, his left foot forward in a solid bare-knuckle fighting stance, ready to raise his fists should the need arise. "Go back to where you came from, and leave me to deal with my wench in my own way. I'm not moving until I have your assurance she will not be harmed further," Jared said, aware of the gathering crowd in the street. He could hear the girl sobbing quietly behind him, but his eyes stayed on her attacker. "Fair enough. You have my word," the man said with a greasy smile, his arms outstretched. "He's lying," the girl whispered. "I'm afraid I don't believe you, mister," Jared said. A man's voice sailed out from the crowd. "He's had it coming." "A good pasting is what he deserves," a female yelled. "He's a bloody menace. He's always putting on that girl. She tells us often how he beats her," an aged fellow croaked, raising his walking stick and waving it in the air. "Hey, Holden, watch what you'm doing with that thing," a young man said, as he ducked the swing of the cane. Jared heard it all, but still he watched the brute who had been beating his daughter. "It would seem you are not very popular with your neighbours," he said with a little grin. "Clear off the lot of you," the man said, throwing out his arm to point up the street. Jared didn't flinch at the movement, but kept his gaze on the other man's eyes. They would be the tell, the indicator of fight or flight, and Jared was ready for either. "Look, mate, this ain't got anything to do with you, so let's call it a day and you can be on your way," the man muttered, tapping his hands on the sides of his trousers. Jared drew in a deep breath through his nostrils, expanding his chest further, and exhaled long and slow. The crowd were waiting a little impatiently to see if the confrontation might spill over into a real good punch-up. Without turning, Jared asked, "What's your name, miss?" "Clarice," came the reply. "What a pretty name. And are you likely to be safe if I should do as your father suggests and leave?" "No, I doubt it." "That's what I thought," Jared said with a nod. "So we find ourselves in a standoff." He directed his words to the father. Jared noted the flash of anger in the man's eyes, and he bunched his fists. This was not going to end well. In a trice, the father leapt forward, But Jared was ready for him. He raised his hands, the left guarding his face, and the right shot out in a jab. His knuckles caught the man on the nose and he staggered back. Cradling his battered proboscis, the man wailed as he saw the blood slipping between his fingers. The crowd erupted in applause, shouts and jeers, loud as Clarice's father stared with disbelief at his bloody hands. With a rebel yell and head down, he charged forward, intent on causing bodily harm to the interfering stranger. Jared saw it coming, and at the very last moment he stepped aside, allowing the irate father to hurtle past him. Then he heard a sickening crunch as the man's head hit the wooden gatepost. A communal "Ow!" sounded from the crowd, and Jared saw the people wincing as they watched Clarice's father crumple at the knees. Clarice whispered, "You can't stay here. It's not safe. You have to leave. Today," Jared urged. "Where would I go? I have no money. I have nothing." The crowd leaned in to listen to the conversation, but all took a step back at Jared's next words. "There must be someone who would be willing to take you in until you can find work." Clarice laughed, but there was no mirth in it. "You jest. Look at them." She tilted her chin up, indicating the spectators. "There's not one among them that would stand up to him." Her finger jabbed in the direction of her groaning father. "I'm trapped, kind stranger." "Jared Johnson is the name, and I'm the manager at McGuire's Rag and Bone Yard. Pleased to meet you, Clarice, Clarice Connaught," she replied shyly, hardly noticing the hushed remarks from the crowd. They all knew Toby McGuire, the big Irishman who lived in Ivy Lane and was a force to be reckoned with. "Well, Miss Connaught, would you care to take tea with me?" Jared said, hooking an arm. Blushing to the roots of her hair, Clarice faltered, but only for a moment. Then she pushed her arm through his. "I would. Thank you, Mr. Johnson." The two strode to his rag cart, and he groaned as he saw that the pigeons were attacking the lunch he had left in his hurry to help. They flew off as he handed Clarice up into the driving seat. Picking up the reins, he called out, "Walk on, Bess, my beauty." Clarice gave a little yelp as the cart lurched forward and held onto the side of the bench. They could still hear the cheers as they turned the corner at the end of the street, Bess leading them to the tea shop. "Daddy's going to be very cross with me," Clarice said. "Oh, he'll be too worried about his aching head to be angry with you," Jared answered with a grin. Clarice threw back her head and laughed fit to burst, her curls bouncing and her blue eyes shining. Jared's heart missed a beat as he looked at the dark-haired beauty, and he wondered, could this be what they called love at first sight? Chapter 2. The cart halted outside the tea shop, and Jared assisted Clarice to alight. Grabbing the oat sack, he hung it over Bessie's neck before turning back to the girl he had rescued. Holding the door open for her to enter first, he followed her in and they walked to a table in the corner. "This is lovely," Clarice said, as she looked around. The room was snug and welcoming, with tables covered in pristine white cotton cloths. Sunlight shone through the small mullioned windows, casting rainbow colours around the room. Each table held a slim vase containing one flower and a sprig of greenery. Wooden chairs had cushions fastened to the seats and backs. Chintz curtains were held aside in swathes by ties of the same material. The whole effect was very tasteful, Jared thought. Customers chatted quietly as they enjoyed their afternoon tea. A waitress appeared, dressed in a long black dress covered with a white pinafore. Blonde hair piled up neatly was topped with a frilly cap. "Good afternoon. What can I get for you?" she asked. "Afternoon tea for two, please," Jared answered. "Certainly, sir." The waitress smiled and strode away. "I've never done this before," Clarice whispered. "Done what? Been in a tea shop or out with a man you've only just met?" "Both." Clarice's eyes twinkled as she spoke. The waitress appeared again, with plates and cutlery wrapped in white linen napkins, which she placed in front of them. Clarice watched her go back.